I'm a 33-year-old guy, and my wife, who's 29, and I have been married for 3 years. However, our relationship has spanned a total of 8 years. Lately, something happened that has left me deeply unsettled and questioning whether my wife might have been unfaithful. Despite this, there are factors suggesting she could very well be completely loyal. I'm feeling overwhelmed and uncertain about the best course of action, and I'm reaching out for advice on how to handle this confusing situation. Background: my wife has been working as a nurse at a local medical practice for the past 5 years. Her typical work hours are from 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., Monday through Friday. I work as a shift maintenance engineer at a manufacturing plant nearby, with my shift running from 3:30 p.m. to 1:30 a.m., Sunday through Wednesday. Our schedules are quite different, but despite this, I've always felt that our relationship is strong and stable. We've managed to stay connected during the early part of my work shift through a constant exchange of texts and phone calls until she heads to bed. By the time I get home, she's already fast asleep, so I usually unwind by watching TV for an hour or two before joining her in bed. Our sex life has consistently been satisfying, and as far as I can tell, it continues to be great. We've chosen not to have children because my wife has medical issues that prevent her from carrying a pregnancy to term. This has never been a problem for me, as I've never had a strong desire to become a parent. When my wife and I first started dating, she was plagued by severe insomnia. She tried a range of over-the-counter sleep aids and various prescription medications before her doctor eventually prescribed Ambien Zolpidem. Her struggle with insomnia was having a profound impact on her health and overall well-being. Initially, the Ambien was meant to be a temporary solution, while her doctor explored other treatment options. But she's ended up relying on it for approximately 4 years now. At first, the medication left her feeling groggy throughout the day, but she adjusted to that side effect relatively quickly. However, the sleepwalking, a side effect that appeared almost immediately, has persisted. Over the years, she's tried different medications that didn't cause sleepwalking, but also didn't effectively address her sleep issues. Consequently, we've had to learn to manage and cope with her sleepwalking episodes as best as we can. Most of these incidents have been more humorous than alarming, though they can occasionally be unsettling. I've lost count of the number of times I've found her wandering into the kitchen in the middle of the night, often completely unclothed, and consuming whatever baked goods I've made, be it brownies, gingerbread, pie, or anything else. On numerous occasions, I've watched her prepare an enormous bowl of cereal with milk, only to sit on the floor to eat it. I vividly recall one night when she spilled the milk and, hours later, woke up sitting in the milk-soaked spot on the floor, still eating cereal. She has absolutely no memory of these nocturnal activities. I've even witnessed her smoking in her sleep, despite her professional knowledge as a nurse about the dangers of smoking, chugging down a beer, and even attempting yoga poses, all while she's still asleep. Yet none of these odd and perplexing incidents could possibly compare to the utterly surreal experience we had on our honeymoon flight, which was an entirely new level of bizarre and remains one of the most unforgettable episodes we've encountered. To give you a fuller picture of what I'm dealing with, let me describe an unforgettable episode from our honeymoon. After our wedding, I decided to whisk my wife away to Europe for a 4-week adventure. It was her first trip outside of the United States, and I wanted to make it as memorable as possible. We boarded our flight at the Atlanta airport, excited to head to Paris, France. About 2 hours into the flight, my wife took an Ambien to help her sleep, while I'd taken a Dramamine to stave off motion sickness. I was already drifting off when I suddenly felt a splash of liquid hit me. Groggy and disoriented, I woke up to find my wife had spilled a glass of red wine all over me and herself. As I tried to figure out what was going on, it quickly became clear that she was sleepwalking. Not only had she managed to spill wine everywhere, but she had also dropped her pants right there on the plane. In disbelief, I asked her what she was doing. She calmly explained that she was trying to dry her pants. That explanation might have made sense if she had been wearing anything else underneath, but all she had on was a pair of panties with the word "juicy" written across the back. This left her in a highly embarrassing situation, surrounded by passengers and crew members. The rest of the flight turned into a chaotic ordeal. My wife continued to sleepwalk, and I found myself having to keep her warm with an airline blanket while guiding her back and forth to the restroom. The entire situation was stressful, but I had no choice but to manage it as best as I could. When we landed in Paris and went through customs, she was still sleepwalking. The customs agents didn't question her at all, but they subjected me to an extensive and uncomfortable interrogation. The entire experience was a surreal mix of embarrassment and frustration. To make matters worse, she lost consciousness somewhere over the Atlantic and woke up in our Paris hotel room with no memory of what had happened. This incident is a prime example of the unpredictable and sometimes deeply inconvenient nature of her sleepwalking. I'm sharing this story to give you an idea of the kind of behavior my wife exhibits when she sleepwalks. It's baffling why she never wakes up or remembers these episodes. Over the years, her sleepwalking has led to some strange and sometimes revealing moments. For instance, she has disclosed information in her sleep that I wasn't supposed to know. One notable instance involved a conversation she had with a friend named Renee, who had shared confidential details about concerns regarding our marriage. Renee didn't want any of this information getting out, so my wife was sworn to secrecy. When I asked her if Renee was planning to file for divorce or if it was someone else, she looked shocked and asked how I knew about it. Although these revelations have been surprising, they've never suggested infidelity on her part. On the flip side, she has also made numerous nonsensical statements while sleepwalking. For example, she once declared, "I wrecked your Lamborghini yesterday, but you can drive my car to work." This was confusing because we don't own a Lamborghini or any luxury car for that matter. Another time she asked, "Did you get rid of those monkeys in the garage?" Which was puzzling since we don't have a garage or any monkeys. And honestly, I wish I did have a Lamborghini. Just a few nights ago, something happened that has left me feeling particularly unsettled. After finishing my shift at work, I came home and decided to relax by watching highlights from the NBA playoffs. I was sitting in front of the TV, eating some food before heading to bed, when my wife walked past me and went into the kitchen. As usual, she grabbed a few slices of the sourdough bread I had baked the previous day and settled on the love seat to eat. I asked her if she enjoyed the bread, and she said it was good. I then asked if she needed anything to drink, and she replied that she could get it herself if needed. I went back to focusing on the TV, but then she said something I didn't quite catch. When I asked her to repeat it, she said that one of the things that upset her the most about me was that I didn't listen to her. She then mentioned a person named Steve, a pseudonym, and said that he always listened to her, which was why she enjoyed talking to him so much. Curious, I asked who Steve was, and she told me that he was a patient she couldn't because the doctor overseeing him had to release him due to a conflict of interest. I was taken aback by this revelation. Despite the shock of her words, I had to remind myself that she was sleepwalking. Nevertheless, her harsh and unexpected comments were hurtful, regardless of their truthfulness. She's never made such statements about anyone, real or imaginary, before. This incident has left me perplexed and unsure about how to interpret her words and what steps to take next. It's a troubling situation, and I'm at a loss about how to handle it. Under normal circumstances, I'd have seized the first opportunity we had to discuss the situation directly. I would have asked her who Steve was and what exactly she meant by her provocative comment about wanting to be intimate with him. However, I've yet to bring it up. Instead, I've been wrestling with this issue in my mind for days, and it's been consuming my thoughts. I'm at a real crossroads, trying to figure out the best course of action. Given that our work schedules are so out of sync, each of us has the potential to be unfaithful without the other knowing. Although it would be a clear conflict of interest for her to have an affair with a patient, I know that some patients have made advances or expressed interest in her before. She's always been upfront about these situations, and while there have been moments that have stirred my frustration, her practice is generally quite effective at handling unwanted attention professionally. Now, my primary concern is whether there's a specific patient, like Steve or someone else, who might be catching her eye. I keep wondering if I'd even be aware of it if something was going on. I've always had a strong foundation of trust in our relationship, and her comment about Steve is the first time I've questioned that trust. It's not that I believe anyone is deserving of complete trust. No one can be fully trusted 100%, but up until now, I had placed almost complete trust in her. Now, however, I'm uncertain and struggling to determine the best way to address this unsettling situation. I've been thinking about various methods to investigate this issue, and I'm conflicted about the best approach. While I have no moral issues with snooping if it's necessary to uncover the truth, I'm unsure about how and where to start. Her cell phone is an obvious point of interest, But given that she has her own phone plan, gaining access to her phone or even reviewing her phone bills would be a complicated and invasive process. Following her around isn't feasible, especially since when we're both off work, she's home, and we're together. My real concern is the time I spend away at work. I've considered other potential methods of investigation, such as using a voice-activated recorder in our home or her car, but I'm unsure if these devices would actually provide any useful information, or if they would be an effective way to catch her in the act. Another option might be hidden cameras, either in the house or in her car, but I worry about the implications of installing such devices and whether they would give me the answers I need. I've also thought about accessing her laptop to see if there's anything suspicious, but again, I'm not sure if this would yield any meaningful results. Before she made that comment about Steve, I had almost complete trust in her. Now, though, I'm feeling increasingly uneasy and concerned. I don't want to overlook any potential warning signs and end up regretting not taking action sooner. Cheating is a deal breaker for me, and if she is involved with someone else, I need to know the truth. The idea of her being unfaithful is weighing heavily on me, and the way the information was revealed complicates things further. Even if I suggested a polygraph test, I'm not confident it would provide clear answers, given the nature of her sleepwalking episodes and the possibility that her subconscious could influence the results. This situation is starting to create a rift between us, despite her acting normally. I'm hesitant to confront her directly because I know that those who are cheating often lie, and I'm aware that I have only one chance to get to the bottom of this before she becomes aware of my suspicions. I've spent countless hours reading about how unfaithful partners often manage to hide their betrayal without leaving obvious clues, which only heightens my anxiety and sense of uncertainty. I'm in a difficult position, trying to balance my instincts with the need for concrete evidence. I need to figure out the best way to address this issue without causing more harm to our relationship or missing any potential red flags that could later lead to regret. In response to my mounting anxiety and the need for some clarity, I decided to purchase 3 voice-activated recorders. My plan is to strategically place these devices to capture any potentially incriminating conversations or behaviors. One recorder will be installed in her car, along with a GPS tracker to monitor her whereabouts more closely. I'm particularly concerned about whether external sounds, like those from a TV or radio, might activate these recorders unintentionally. I'm hoping they will only respond to actual conversations and not pick up background noise. I also plan to place one recorder in our bedroom and another in the living room, where we have a TV. These devices are scheduled to arrive via Amazon on Tuesday, which will be delivered to my workplace. Once they're in hand, my strategy is to check each recorder daily for the next 3 weeks. I'll review the recordings for any signs of suspicious behavior or conversations. If nothing alarming shows up after that period, I'll reassess the situation. If I still have doubts or if something seems off, I'm prepared to hire a private investigator to dig deeper. On the other hand, if the recordings reveal nothing and it seems like the whole Steve issue was just a sleepwalking episode with no real basis, I might decide to let the matter go. My goal is to find out if there's something concrete to be concerned about, or if this is just a misunderstanding. This plan will help me determine whether there's any truth to my suspicions, or if I've been misled by a momentary lapse in her sleepwalking state. After each shift, I made it a point to meticulously review the audio files from the 3 voice-activated recorders. Over the first couple of days, the recordings were uneventful, revealing nothing more than the mundane details of our daily routines. The recorders picked up my wife's habit of singing along to the radio when she was driving alone and her tendency to curse at other drivers, something I do myself, despite knowing they can't hear us. To ensure the recorders were functioning properly, I tested them by calling her a few times. During these calls, I verified that they captured both ends of the conversation clearly. Her frequent calls to her friend Renee for drinks after work were nothing new, so there were no indications of anything suspicious in those interactions. I began to feel a bit more at ease, thinking my initial concerns might have been overblown. However, during one of our shared moments at home, I observed her engrossed in texting someone. She was clearly enjoying whatever she was reading, laughing and smirking as she typed. When I inquired about what was so amusing, she dismissed it with a vague comment that it was nothing significant and that I wouldn't understand the joke without being in on it. While I accepted her explanation at face value, the incident left me with a nagging curiosity about who she was communicating with and what could be so entertaining. Then, a couple of days later, I reviewed the recordings from the voice-activated recorder placed in her car, and what I discovered was deeply troubling. She had received a call from someone I couldn't identify, but the conversation indicated that this was someone relatively new in her life, and it sounded like a man. The interaction was heavily skewed towards him talking, with her responding in brief, somewhat guarded replies. The conversation took a concerning turn when she asked him if he was happily married. His reply seemed to prompt her to respond with, "Me too." Hearing two married individuals discussing their marital contentment in such a context was disturbing. I captured her taking calls from this person twice in her car, which was already unsettling enough. But things took a darker turn when she made a call to him one night while we were in bed. Listening to that recording was an emotional roller coaster. I heard them engaged in phone sex, with my wife's moans and pleas echoing through the recording. The sheer betrayal I felt was immense, and my blood pressure must have skyrocketed. Despite my fury, I had to maintain a facade of calmness and normality. It was exasperating to see her acting extra affectionate and friendly towards me while I was seething inside. The following day, their phone conversations continued, further testing my patience and resolve. They arranged to meet up on Sunday afternoon, a time when I would be at work. She planned to bring him to our house and then drive him back to his car, making it even more crucial for me to uncover the truth. My anger was overwhelming, and I was torn between the urge to confront her immediately and the desire to see if she would actually follow through with her plans. I had a strong suspicion that this mysterious caller was indeed Steve, but given that I had never suspected her of cheating before, it dawned on me that Steve could simply be the current flavor of the month. I had no idea what Steve looked like or how well she knew him. What was clear, however, was that she had a significant interest in pursuing this connection further. I knew I couldn't go to work that night, as my need to uncover the truth was far more pressing. I called the plant manager, explained the situation, and requested that he arrange for someone else to cover my shift. I needed to be present, to observe the situation firsthand, and to confront her if necessary. The gravity of what I had uncovered and the looming potential of her infidelity made it crucial for me to be there, to face the reality of the situation, and to get the answers I desperately needed. Yesterday afternoon started off like any other. I left for work at my usual time, focusing on the tasks at hand. After finishing my shift, I decided to take a break from the tension by having dinner alone at a local restaurant, enjoying a meal in solitude. It was a rare opportunity to relax and clear my head. Once done, I drove to my brother's apartment to borrow his car, a crucial part of my plan to stay under the radar. Throughout the evening, my wife and I exchanged our regular texts. Everything seemed perfectly normal, too normal perhaps. This made me wonder if she was intentionally maintaining her routine to avoid raising any suspicion. We had agreed that she and her companion would meet at 8:30 p.m., and they were expected to return to our house afterward. I parked a few houses down from ours, careful to avoid drawing attention. At precisely 8 p.m., I saw my wife exit our home, get into her car, and drive away. I followed her, keeping a safe distance to avoid detection. My wife headed towards a nearby public park and pulled into the parking lot. To avoid being seen, I drove past the park, turned around, and parked in a lot across the street. From my vantage point, I watched as a man entered the passenger seat of her car. The darkness made it impossible to identify him clearly, and I had to crouch down to avoid being noticed as they drove away towards our home. I knew her destination, but I wanted to keep close enough to observe who would get out of the car when they arrived. Unfortunately, a driver ahead of me was overly cautious, causing me to miss a green light and lose sight of my wife's car. By the time I reached our house, her car was already in the circular driveway with the passenger door facing the house. I quickly pulled out my phone, trying to capture any incriminating evidence. However, when the car door opened, the interior light didn't come on. Given the time I had spent in her car recently, I suspected this might have been deliberate, although it could have been a coincidence if the bulb had burned out. My wife got out of the car and went around to greet her companion, who appeared to be a tall man, but it was too dark to make a positive identification. I chose not to confront them immediately. Instead, I wanted to let them settle in, hoping that this would make them less cautious. I texted my wife with a fabricated story about a robotic welder at work losing all its PLC programming, which would cause me to be very late coming home. Her response was calm and nonchalant. She mentioned she was heading to bed early because she needed her sleep. Seeing her reply made my eye twitch uncontrollably. I could barely contain my anger, knowing full well what she was likely doing in our bed so early. The thought of it had me inventing new curse words and feeling an intense rage. I grabbed an aluminum bat from the back seat of my car for self-defense, just in case the man turned out to be a formidable opponent. I deliberately left my gun behind, worried about how I might react in the heat of the moment. As I approached the front door, I could hear music playing inside, which I hoped would help cover the sound of me entering. I unlocked the door and saw the lights on in the living room where the music was playing, but the room was otherwise empty. I heard giggling coming from upstairs and followed the sound to our bedroom. As I climbed the staircase, the giggling grew louder. When I reached the top floor, I opened the door to our bedroom and turned on the light, expecting to confront a compromising situation. Instead, I was met with the sight of two figures in bed, the covers pulled high. My heart pounded as I grabbed the edge of the comforter with one hand, preparing to confront Steve with my other hand. I yanked the covers back, only to find my brother, the owner of the car I had borrowed, and his wife, both fully dressed and grinning from ear to ear. For a split second, I was disoriented, imagining my brother, his wife, and my wife involved in some bizarre, cult-like scenario. As a whirlwind of questions rushed through my mind, I tried to understand what was happening. Then someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned around to see my youngest brother and sister, along with the rest of my family, who immediately began showering me with silly string until every can was empty. My family then tackled me and tickled me mercilessly, laughing uncontrollably. My wife approached, gave me a big kiss, and joined in the laughter. What I had thought was a serious betrayal turned out to be a surprise party orchestrated by my family. The elaborate setup was a way to celebrate a special occasion, and I was both relieved and bewildered by the outcome. I didn't get the closure I was initially seeking, but the absurdity of the situation offered me a new perspective. It became clear that my wife's faithfulness, while uncertain, was not something I needed to stress over to the extent I had been. So while the dramatic conclusion I expected didn't materialize, the experience taught me that sometimes the truth is far less dramatic than our fears. I'm coming to terms with the fact that while I don't have 100% certainty about my wife's fidelity, I am okay with the reality that not everything is as it initially seemed. Here's what happened. After my wife's sleepwalking incident where she mentioned wanting to cheat, I ended up sharing the story with a close friend of mine. I was overwhelmed and needed to talk to someone I trusted. My friend in turn told another friend, who, as it happened, eventually passed the story along to my wife. Her reaction was a mix of emotions. Initially, she was deeply saddened, feeling remorse that her sleepwalking comments, however unintended, had caused me such distress and made me question our relationship. She was upset that I hadn't come directly to her to discuss my concerns, which led to her second reaction, frustration. She wrestled with the situation from both perspectives, her own and mine. She understood why her sleepwalking statements could be alarming and hurtful. As she processed her feelings, she found the whole ordeal somewhat amusing. She decided she would address the issue directly with me by revealing she'd read the post, reassuring me of her loyalty, and promising to do whatever it took to prove she had never been unfaithful and never would be. But as it turns out, my family had a different plan in mind. It was actually my mom who had been texting and laughing with my wife that day. The so-called joke was a setup orchestrated by my mom and the rest of my family. They had been plotting a big family gathering as a part of their elaborate prank on me. The idea was to turn this entire situation into a huge family event, complete with over 30 friends and relatives converging at our house. Yes, it was genuinely wonderful to see everyone, but I have to admit, being the center of an elaborate joke where I looked like a total fool wasn't exactly my idea of a good time. I'm sure I'll get over it eventually, but it was quite a spectacle. The coordination was impressive. Cars were parked far down the street, and everyone had arrived and settled in shortly after I left for work. What I hadn't realized was that my siblings had been tailing me all night. My sister was stationed at the entrance of our subdivision, keeping a watchful eye on the comings and goings. My brother later confessed that it was a struggle for him to keep a straight face when I came to borrow his car, fully unaware that my relatives were busy setting up for the surprise gathering in the backyard. So, while I was trying to uncover potential infidelity, my family was busy creating an elaborate ruse. The whole scenario was a masterclass in surprise planning, and I had been entirely in the dark. The result was a massive family gathering designed to play a prank on me, which, while not exactly what I had expected, certainly made for an unforgettable night. Oh, and let me elaborate on the whole Steve situation, because it was quite a revelation. The name Steve was a placeholder I used to keep the story generalized and protect privacy. But it turns out the actual name my wife used was Conrad. This is where things took an interesting turn. When my wife and I finally had the chance to sit down and unpack the events, she was eager to understand what name I had heard. Once I told her it was Conrad, she immediately made the connection and explained why she had said that name. It turns out Conrad is a character from a TV show called The Resident. Now, I'm not exactly a TV aficionado. My entertainment choices typically revolve around sports and the occasional news update. But my wife is a huge fan of medical dramas, and The Resident has been her go-to show. The character Conrad, portrayed by actor Matt Shukri, had become somewhat of a fixture in our household conversations. The specific episode that seemed to leave an impression on her involved Conrad being sidelined from his duties and needing medical clearance to resume his work. This storyline must have struck a chord with her, particularly since she's a nurse and often relates to the scenarios depicted in medical dramas. The fact that she had been binge-watching The Resident around the time of her sleepwalking revelations makes it clear that her subconscious had latched onto the character. So when she blurted out that she wanted to be with Conrad, it wasn't some hidden truth or betrayal, but rather a reflection of her mind's preoccupation with the show. I suppose it's natural for people to develop crushes on fictional characters, and while Matt Shukri is undeniably charming, I doubt he'll be showing up at our door anytime soon. So, Matt Chutri, if you're out there, please keep your distance from my wife, even if you are an excellent listener. As it turns out, the elaborate scheme to make me think she was being unfaithful involved more than just mentioning a fictional character. My wife had orchestrated the whole situation with voice-activated recorders. She staged fake conversations, including steamy phone sex scenarios, to make me believe she was involved with someone else. Her ability to mimic such situations with convincing detail was both impressive and, in hindsight, quite entertaining. The phone sex recordings were particularly elaborate, and she had to put in considerable effort to maintain the illusion. The fact that she was able to keep a straight face while performing these acts, all while knowing she was merely playing a role, was both commendable and a testament to her commitment to the prank. When we reviewed the recordings together, we couldn't stop laughing. It was clear that she had gone to great lengths to pull off this elaborate ruse. The initial intention was to create enough confusion to make me question her fidelity, all while she knew that there was no real cause for concern. The fake phone sex, intended to be a one-time act, became a recurring performance because she realized she hadn't provided me with specific details about when and where the supposed meetings would take place. So she had to repeat the act to make the scenario seem even more plausible. After the surprise was fully revealed, the evening turned into a joyous family gathering. My dad took charge of grilling, and he prepared an incredible feast of steaks that everyone enjoyed. The table was laden with a variety of delicious foods, and the atmosphere was filled with laughter and celebration. Given how overwhelmed I felt, I ended up taking 5 shots of Patron just to steady my nerves, and I spent the rest of the night in a pleasantly tipsy state. I'm grateful for my mom's support throughout this experience. If she hadn't been there, I might have ended up far more inebriated than I did. Thanks again, Mom. In the midst of the revelry, my brother returned to his apartment to fetch his car, and he and his wife drove my car back to our house while we were at the gathering. They decided to add a touch of mischief by covering my car in toilet paper and shaving cream, and they even adorned it with a giant sign that read, "Honk if you want to F ***** Steve." While I wasn't going to drive around with that sign, the entire prank was captured on video. Despite the fact that it was all in good fun, I must admit that during the time I was grappling with worry and suspicion, it was far from enjoyable. In the end, the entire experience brought my wife and me closer together. We had an open and heartfelt conversation about trust, transparency, and the importance of maintaining open communication in our relationship. Moving forward, we've both agreed to keep our phones and laptops accessible to each other and to maintain our GPS features for safety and peace of mind. Despite the way I looked and felt during the height of the confusion, the situation ultimately served as a valuable lesson. It reaffirmed our commitment to each other and highlighted the importance of trust in our relationship. Even though I may have appeared to be a complete fool, the experience led to a deeper understanding between us and strengthened our bond.